My name is Michael Bennett, and this is my confession. People call me a curator, a visionary, sometimes even a savior of dying artists. In truth, I am a merchant of illusions. My gallery on Madison Avenue gleams like a temple, white marble, soft jazz, champagne and crystal flutes. Collectors drift through the space murmuring words, like brilliant and transcendent, as if vocabulary itself could justify the price tags hanging beside the canvases. They never see what I see. Behind every masterpiece is a bruise, behind every color a confession. But they do not pay for pain, they pay for its disguise. My job is to make sorrow look expensive. Every morning, I arrive before the city wakes. I like the silence before commerce begins. The gallery smells faintly of varnish and roses left to die in vases overnight. I unlock the doors, switch on the lights, and the world becomes performance again. I tell myself that I have mastered the art of not feeling too much. And yet, just across the street, life insists on reminding me that beauty can exist without permission. She sits there on the sidewalk, back against the cold wall of the cafe next door, a beggar with a sketchbook. Rain or frost, she is always there, small, quiet, stubborn. Her clothes are the color of dust, her hair pulled into a knot that time forgot. In her lap, a handful of crumpled papers, each one holding a face, a landscape, a heartbeat captured in graphite. The first time I noticed her, I felt something unpleasant, a mix of pity and irritation. My clients did not need the sight of poverty parked outside the temple of aesthetics. I almost asked security to move her. But then I saw what she was drawing. It was a face. Familiar. The tilt of the mouth, the wide, open eyes, too young, too alive to be mistaken. My hand froze on the door handle. She was sketching my daughter. Emma. 19 years old forever. Dead for 5. I told myself it was coincidence, a trick of resemblance. But when she turned the page, there was another. And another. Every angle of her face, the way her hair fell across her brow, the shy, sideways smile she used to give when she wanted forgiveness. I had buried those images, sealed them away with the rest of the past. Now they stared back at me from the hands of a stranger who had never met her. I crossed the street without knowing why. My voice betrayed me when I spoke. "How much for that one?" She looked up, startled, as if I had interrupted a prayer. "Which one?" I pointed to the drawing. My drawing, though she could not know it. She hesitated, uncertain. "Whatever you think it's worth." Her tone was flat, but her eyes weren't. They carried that fragile mix of defiance and exhaustion that comes from being overlooked too long. I handed her a 50 and took the sketch carefully, like something alive that might flee if I moved too fast. As I turned away, she said softly, almost as an afterthought, "I draw from photographs. Found them in an old box at a thrift shop." Photographs. By the time I reached my office, my hands were shaking so badly the sketch crumpled slightly at the edges. I laid it on my desk beside a framed picture of Emma that I had not been able to look at in years. Same angle. Same smile. The photograph was missing from its frame. The room seemed to tilt. Somewhere outside, the city began its day, horns and footsteps rising like a restless symphony. Inside, I sat staring at the drawing, unable to decide whether the world had just handed me a miracle or reopened a wound I'd never learned to close. I did not sleep that night. The city throbbed outside my window, taxi lights bleeding across the glass, sirens pulsing like a heartbeat that refused to rest. I sat in my study with the sketch of Emma on my desk, lit by the weak glow of a single lamp. The paper was still warm from her hands. Every time I looked at it, I felt something rising, not just grief, but the raw, unfamiliar ache of being seen again. For 5 years, I had built my life on forgetting. I turned loss into routine, silence into decorum. I spoke of art, of legacy, of the market. I never spoke of her. I told myself that love, like a painting, fades if you leave it under too much light. But here it was, my daughter's face, redrawn by a stranger with a pencil and some borrowed paper. She had captured details I thought only a father could know. The tiny scar near Emma's temple, the tilt of her smile, the way her eyes always seemed to be searching for something just out of reach. I tried to rationalize it. Maybe the girl had found a copy of the photo online, a magazine feature, an old press release. I was a public man once. The gallery had been in every paper after Emma's death. Maybe she was simply talented, lucky. Yet luck does not explain tenderness. By dawn, I could not stand the waiting. I left the gallery door unlocked and went outside. The air smelled of rain and exhaust, and there she was again, sitting cross-legged on the pavement, sketchbook balanced on her knees, as if the night had never happened. "Morning," I said, my voice rough from the hours of silence. She looked up, squinting through the pale light. "You're the guy from yesterday." "Yes." I hesitated. "You draw every day?" "Pretty much. Keeps me warm." Her tone was light, but her hands trembled slightly as she tucked a loose strand of hair behind her ear. Her nails were rimmed with charcoal, her sleeves frayed at the edges. I nodded toward her pages. "May I see?" She shrugged and handed one over. This time it was not Emma. It was a street scene, the corner of my gallery, the glass doors, the reflection of passing cars. But in the reflection, faint and ghostlike, she had drawn a young girl standing inside, her hand pressed against the glass. My throat tightened. "You have a good eye," I managed. She smiled faintly. "You learn to see when no one's looking at you." The words hit harder than I expected. For years, I had surrounded myself with people who looked but never saw, clients, collectors, critics. I had forgotten what honesty sounded like. "What's your name?" I asked. "Elena," she said. "Elena Cruz." "I'm Michael." I didn't add asterisk Michael Bennett, owner of the Bennett Gallery, former critic, former father. Asterisk, the titles felt useless in front of someone who could see right through them. She tilted her head, studying me like I was the subject now. "You look like someone who used to love art." The comment was so simple it hurt. "Used to," I repeated. "Maybe I still do." "Then buy something," she said with a smirk. "Support the arts." I laughed, actually laughed, for the first time in months. I handed her another 50, took the drawing of the glass doors, and walked back inside. All morning, I couldn't stop looking at it. That ghostly figure in the window haunted me. I placed the sketch beside the one of Emma and realized they belonged together, two halves of the same truth, the living and the lost staring at each other through glass. Somewhere between the laughter and the ache, a thought took root. Maybe I hadn't found her by accident. Maybe the universe had run out of subtlety. And as the rain began again, tapping softly on the gallery windows, I caught myself hoping, something I had sworn never to do again, that tomorrow she would still be there. The next morning, I watched for her through the gallery window long before she appeared. My assistants assumed I was waiting for a client. In a way, I was, just not the kind who bought anything. When she finally arrived, the street seemed to shift around her. Elena wore the same coat, the same cracked shoes, but something in her carried light. She knelt beside her sketchbook like a priest before an altar. I told myself not to go out there again. It wasn't my place. She was a stranger who happened to hold my daughter's face in her hands. But logic and grief don't speak the same language. When I stepped outside, she didn't look up. "You're early," she said. "So are you," I answered. She smiled slightly. "Artists don't sleep. We just blink slower." Her sketchbook was open. This time, she was drawing a child's room. A small bed, a half-open window, curtains breathing in the wind. I froze. The details were exact. The crooked lamp, the framed ballet poster, even the stuffed rabbit Emma used to sleep with. "How do you know that room?" I asked quietly. She looked at me, startled. I don't. It just came to me." Sometimes I see things before I draw them, like memories that aren't mine. Her words hit like cold water. Memories that aren't mine. I wanted to ask more, but she was already shading the corner of the window, lost in her trance. "Do you ever dream of them?" I asked. She hesitated, pencil hovering. "Sometimes. Faces, mostly. One girl, always the same. She's young, smiling, but sad. She stands near water. I think she's waiting for someone." My chest tightened. By the lake, I thought. Emma's favorite place. I tried to breathe, but the air felt heavy. "You should come inside," I said finally. "It's warmer." She blinked at me, unsure whether to trust the offer. "I don't belong in places like that. You belong wherever your art takes you." Inside, she moved carefully, her shoes squeaking on the polished floor. The gallery was still closed, the paintings draped in early light. She looked around with reverence, as if she'd stepped into a cathedral. "People really pay thousands for this?" she whispered. "They pay to feel something without the risk of losing anything," I said. Her gaze landed on a portrait near the back, a woman with dark hair, elegant, remote. My ex-wife. "She looks lonely," Elena murmured. She was. We stood there, silence stretching thin between us. Then she turned to me, her expression soft but unflinching. "You've lost someone." It wasn't a question. I nodded once. "My daughter." Her voice dropped to a whisper. "The girl in my drawings." I could not speak. My throat burned. She reached out, her fingers almost touching my sleeve, but she stopped herself. "I'm sorry," she said. "I didn't know." I swallowed hard. "How could you?" She shook her head. "I just felt her. Like she wanted to be seen." For a long moment we said nothing. Outside, the city roared on, oblivious. Inside, the gallery felt like a chapel filled with ghosts. Hers, mine, and one we somehow shared. When she finally left, she forgot one of her sketches on the counter. I picked it up carefully. It wasn't Emma this time. It was me, sitting by the window, staring at the same piece of paper I now held. The accuracy made my skin crawl. She had drawn me before I ever stepped outside that morning. I looked at the doorway where she'd been, the faint echo of her footsteps fading into the rain. And for the first time since Emma died, I felt something strange and terrifying, hope, sneaking through the cracks of my carefully constructed grief. The day after our strange conversation, the gallery felt hollow. The walls breathed with too much silence. I found myself glancing at the window every few minutes, waiting for a glimpse of her coat, her hair, her impossible eyes. She didn't come. By noon, I gave up pretending to work. The invoices blurred. The paintings looked lifeless. I locked up early and walked toward the cafe next door, half afraid she'd be gone for good. She wasn't. She sat cross-legged on the sidewalk, sketchbook open, humming quietly under her breath. The sound was soft, but it carried something raw, like homesickness. "You disappeared yesterday," I said. She looked up. "I had to find new paper. The good kind's expensive." Her fingers were smudged with charcoal again. Beneath her, the concrete was littered with drawings, faces, hands, fragments of dreams. One caught my eye, a girl standing by a riverbank, sunlight breaking through her hair. My throat went dry. "That's her again," I said. Elena nodded slowly. "She comes back when I try to paint anything else." It's like she wants me to finish her story, but I don't know how. I crouched beside her, the rain dampening the cuffs of my coat. You shouldn't be out here, I said. Come inside. I'll give you a space to work. Proper lighting. Canvases, brushes, whatever you need. She shook her head, wary. Why? Because you have talent? I said. The word sounded thin against the truth that pulsed underneath. Asterisk because you're bringing her back to me. Asterisk. She studied me for a long time. I don't take pity. It isn't pity. I met her gaze. It's an offer. A beat of silence. Then she smiled faintly. Fine. But I'm not scrubbing floors. That laugh escaped me again, unfamiliar, rusty, but real. You'll paint. That's all I ask. By evening, she stood in the gallery's upstairs loft, her entire life packed into one worn backpack. I found her staring at the blank walls, like a prisoner suddenly unsure of her freedom. It's too clean, she said softly. Too empty. Then fill it, I told her. She unpacked her pencils, a few tubes of paint, a handful of brushes chewed at the ends. As she began sketching the first lines of something unseen, I watched the tension in her shoulders melt away. The sound of charcoal scratching paper filled the air like a heartbeat. I poured 2 glasses of wine and handed her one. She hesitated before taking it. What do I owe you for this? Nothing. She frowned. People don't give things for nothing. Then call it a collaboration, I said. You make the art. I give it a home. For a long time, she didn't respond. Then she lifted the glass and clinked it gently against mine. Deal? Hours passed. The city outside fell into its restless rhythm, but inside the loft there was only the whisper of pencil and the hum of rain against the windows. I sat watching her, afraid to speak, afraid that words might break whatever fragile magic was happening between us. Near midnight, she finally leaned back, brushing a loose strand of hair from her face. You keep staring, she said without looking at me. Occupational hazard, I replied. I've spent half my life studying art. She smiled, tired but luminous. Then you should know this already. Everything we paint is a confession. I didn't answer. I just watched as she pinned her first sketch to the wall, the faint outline of a girl's silhouette standing in light. Something inside me cracked open, quietly, but beyond repair. Days turned into weeks, and her presence changed everything. The gallery no longer smelled like varnish and emptiness. It smelled like turpentine, rain, and something alive. I began to linger after hours, pretending to finish paperwork while listening to the rhythmic scrape of her brush upstairs. Every stroke sounded like breathing. Every silence that followed felt like prayer. Elena painted without hesitation, as if each color already lived inside her, waiting to be released. I caught myself watching the curve of her wrist, the way she leaned close to the canvas, the soft furrow between her brows when she was lost inside the work. It wasn't attraction exactly, it was recognition. Like she carried a wound I knew by heart. One evening, I climbed the stairs quietly and found her asleep on the couch, a half-finished painting leaning against the wall. I turned on the lamp. The canvas glowed like a secret being revealed. It was Emma again, but not the same as before. This time, my daughter wasn't smiling. She looked older, wiser, her expression caught between peace and apology. I sank into a chair and stared until my eyes burned. I wanted to be angry, to accuse her of exploiting grief she didn't understand, but the truth was simpler and crueler. She had painted Emma as I remembered her on the day we buried her. And somehow, it was beautiful. When Elena stirred, she saw me and sat up quickly. I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. I raised a hand. Don't. It's perfect. Her eyes softened. She feels familiar to me. like I've known her forever. But I swear I don't know how. She was my daughter, I said quietly. Her name was Emma. The silence that followed was thick, sacred. Elena lowered her gaze. I figured she was someone you lost. You look at her like people look at light they can't stand to live without. Something inside me broke. I laughed once, dry, brittle. You're not wrong. She set the brush down and came closer. You talk about her like she's still here. Maybe she is, I whispered. In these. In you. For a moment, neither of us moved. Then she said, You could paint her yourself. I shook my head. I don't paint. I collect. I sell. That's all. That's not true. She reached out, fingers grazing the air between us. You're just afraid of what would come out. Her words landed like truth I'd been running from. I turned away, staring at the city through the window. The night pressed its reflection against the glass. Two figures, both broken in different ways. She used to paint too, I murmured. Emma. The last thing she finished was a self-portrait. She said she wanted to see who she really was before the world told her. What happened to it? Destroyed. I couldn't stand to look at it after she died. Elena's voice softened. Then maybe I'll paint her again. Not the way she died, the way she should have lived. I looked at her then, really looked. Her eyes were full of something I hadn't seen in anyone for years, grace. The kind that doesn't erase pain, but gives it shape. When she picked up her brush again, I stayed beside her. Not as a dealer. Not as a patron. Just as a man trying to remember how to breathe. And as the first lines of Emma's new portrait appeared on the canvas, I realized Elena wasn't only painting my daughter. She was painting me, the man who'd forgotten what love looked like until she drew it back into existence. I had learned to live inside the rhythm of our strange companionship. She painted, I pretended to work. Some nights we spoke for hours. Others passed in silence, so complete it felt like faith. The gallery breathed differently now, alive, imperfect, human. For the first time in years, I wasn't haunted by emptiness. I was haunted by her. But peace never lasts for men who have buried too much. It started with a folder. An innocent errand, or so I told myself. I wanted to know more about the woman who had somehow resurrected my daughter's face. Curiosity is a polite word for fear. I called an old friend, a journalist who owed me favors, and asked him to check her name. The report arrived 2 days later. Thin. Uneventful. Except for one line. Recovered survivor of highway collision, May 14th, 5 years ago. The same date Emma died. The same road. My pulse slowed to something dangerous. I read the line again until the words blurred. She hadn't just appeared out of nowhere. She had been there. At the scene. That evening, when Elena came down to the main floor, her hands were trembling slightly, black with paint. You look like you've seen a ghost, she said with a faint smile. I might have, I answered. She frowned, unsure if I was joking. I wasn't. I pulled out the report, set it on the counter. Tell me about this. Her face drained of color. Where did you get that? Just tell me it isn't true. She didn't. She sank into the nearest chair, her voice barely a whisper. I don't remember much. Just headlights. Screaming. And then water. Her hands clenched the edge of the table. They said I was lucky. That someone else wasn't. A girl. I couldn't breathe. Her name was Emma. Elena's eyes filled. I tried to help her. I swear I did. She told me to run. The room tilted. The air cracked like glass. She kept talking, words spilling through tears. I saw her face for years. In dreams. I thought it was guilt. I didn't know she was yours. I wanted to speak, to forgive, to rage, but nothing came. I walked to the far wall, my body hollow. The truth didn't destroy me. It simply unstitched everything I'd built to survive. When I turned back, she was still crying. "Say something," she pleaded. "I don't know what to say," I admitted. "You were there. You held her when I couldn't. I've hated the world for taking her, and it was you." My voice cracked. "It was you who tried to save her." She rose slowly, uncertain, afraid to come closer. "I didn't mean to bring her back to hurt you." "You didn't," I said. "You brought her back because she never left you either." Something broke between us then, not distance, but the wall of unspoken things that grief builds around two lonely souls. I stepped closer, close enough to smell the faint trace of turpentine on her skin. "You've been painting her because she still lives somewhere inside you." "Maybe that's why I found you." Elena looked up through tears. "Then what happens now?" I took the painting she'd finished that morning, Emma's portrait, serene and luminous, and leaned it against the wall. "Now," I said softly, "we finish her story. Together." Outside, thunder rolled over the city, heavy and distant. Inside, for the first time, I wasn't afraid of the storm. It was Elena's idea to show the paintings. She said the art wasn't meant to hide anymore, that grief, like beauty, had to breathe or it would rot. I resisted at first. The thought of my daughter's face hanging on those walls, open to strangers' eyes and careless opinions, felt like blasphemy. But Elena looked at me with that quiet conviction of hers, the kind that didn't need argument. "She deserves to be seen," she said. "Both of them do. Her and you." So I agreed. We called it Asterisk. The Girl in the Light. Asterisk, the name was hers too. The invitation list was short. Collectors, critics, friends who still remembered my better years. I ordered new lighting, polished the floors, poured expensive wine that no one would taste. But beneath all the gloss, something in me trembled like glass under heat. The night of the exhibition, the city was soaked in rain, neon bleeding down the wet pavement. Guests arrived wrapped in umbrellas and perfume, stepping through the door with that peculiar hush that happens before judgment. I stood near the entrance, smiling for formality's sake, but my heart wasn't in my chest, it was on the walls. Elena arrived last. She wore a simple black dress, hair loose, eyes bright with a defiance that didn't need defending. When she stepped into the room, conversations faltered. Even the air changed. She moved slowly among the paintings, her fingers brushing the edges of each frame as if touching memories. People whispered around her, admiration, confusion, envy, but she didn't hear them. When she reached the final painting, she stopped. It was the largest piece, Emma, standing in a field of fractured light, neither alive nor gone, smiling at something beyond the frame. The crowd fell silent. Elena turned toward me. "She's not mine anymore," she said softly. "She belongs to the world now." I tried to speak, but the words dissolved. The room blurred. Faces became colors. Sounds melted into air. I felt Emma everywhere, in the warmth of the lights, in the tremor of my hands, in the quiet pride in Elena's eyes. For the first time, grief didn't feel like drowning. It felt like breathing underwater and realizing you'd learned how to survive. After the guests began to leave, I found her sitting on the gallery steps outside, rain slicking her hair. The night smelled of wet asphalt and wine. "They loved it," I said. She smiled without looking up. "They saw it." I sat beside her, our shoulders almost touching. "You know," I said, "for years I thought I hated art. I thought it betrayed me the day Emma died. But maybe it was waiting for me to find you." She turned to me, eyes shimmering. "You didn't find me, Michael. We found each other in the same wreckage." Lightning flashed somewhere above the skyline, painting the world in silver for one brief heartbeat. I reached for her hand. She didn't pull away. Inside the gallery, her paintings glowed through the windows like lanterns, proof that love and loss could occupy the same canvas and still make sense. That night, the storm passed. And for the first time in 5 years, I didn't dream of death. I dreamed of light. Morning spilled through the gallery windows like a quiet forgiveness. The storm had rinsed the city clean, and everything outside looked new. Wet streets, pale sunlight, even the trees along Madison swaying as if they'd been holding their breath all night. I stood alone among the paintings, shoes echoing on the marble, the air heavy with the scent of rain and turpentine. Elena's exhibition had ended hours ago, yet the ghosts of it lingered. The soft murmur of admiration, the faint vibration of applause, the way people looked at her as if she had rewritten sorrow into color. She hadn't come downstairs yet. I didn't rush her. Some miracles need time to land. When she finally appeared, she looked exhausted but alive in a way I'd never seen before. Her eyes shone like she'd fought something invisible and won. She walked barefoot across the cool floor, hair still damp from the rain. "They're all gone?" she asked. "Everyone but the memories," I said. She smiled faintly. "Good. Maybe they'll haunt you instead of me." We both laughed softly, the kind of laugh you only earn after surviving grief. I watched her circle the room, tracing her fingers across the edges of her canvases. They were hers, and yet not. They belonged to both of us now, pieces of our broken histories stitched together with light and brush stroke. "You saved me," I said quietly. She turned, startled. "You gave me a place to exist." "No," I said. "You reminded me how to exist." Outside, the morning traffic hummed, but it sounded distant, unreal. The city had always been loud. Now it felt mercifully far away. Elena walked toward me and stopped a few feet away. "Do you ever think she led us here?" she asked. I didn't hesitate. "Every day." For a moment we just stood there, the silence between us warm, not heavy. Then she reached for my hand. It wasn't the touch of lovers. It was something older, something simpler. Gratitude. Recognition. A promise that healing could be shared. "She's at peace now," Elena said softly. "So are we." We spent the rest of the morning in quiet work, moving paintings, wrapping frames, sweeping the floors. The gallery felt different, less like a monument, more like a home. The light moved across the walls, catching the colors she had poured from her soul. Each canvas seemed to breathe. When she finally stepped outside, the city opened around her. She paused at the corner, sunlight striking her face. I stood in the doorway, watching as she set up her small stool and opened her sketchbook once more, just like that first day. People hurried past her, bankers, tourists, women with coffee cups, but she didn't seem to notice. Her pencil began to move, slow and sure, shaping the world as she saw it. Not flawless, not rich, but alive. I stayed there, leaning against the doorway, and for the first time in years, I didn't feel like a man surrounded by art. I felt like part of it. The wind shifted, carrying the faint smell of rain and charcoal. Elena looked up from her sketch, caught my gaze, and smiled, the same calm, knowing smile Emma used to give when the world surprised her. And in that small, ordinary moment, I understood what the last 5 years had been trying to teach me. Grief doesn't end. It transforms. Love had found a way back into the light. And this time, I didn't look away. Tell me in the comments what you think about this story. Did it move you? And don't forget to like and subscribe to the channel. Rumor says everyone who does will get something good today. Maybe a message. Maybe a smile. Or maybe that small miracle that's already on its way to you.